in response to a follow-up video that I created about a few days ago. This video right here that I created, a long video blabbering about constantly receiving a question in my inbox for folks who just recently bought a sewing machine and they don't know what to do with that sewing machine or where to start. They don't know what tools or supplies they need. So I created this long video blabbering and blabbering about steps, tips, and suggestions and advice you should do if you too also recently just bought a sewing machine from, or maybe you were gifted with a sewing machine from a family member, or you bought yourself a sewing machine recently and you don't know what to do, how to get started, what tools or supplies you'll need. So please watch that video when you're done with this video. Now, in this video today, I want to talk about the essential tools you need to get started in the sewing space if you are a brand new sewist, or if you're not even a sewist but you want to get started in sewing, or if you too also have a sewing machine that you went and bought, or maybe a family member or a friend gifted you a sewing machine and you don't know what to do, where to start, what tools or supplies you'll need, you're a little bit stuck, then please watch this video all the way to the end, because we're going to talk about all the essential tools you need to get started today with that sewing machine that you have so you could start sewing easily for beginners. Now, the first thing you're going to need to start sewing is a sewing machine, obviously, right? There are several different sewing machines out here right now in the stores. The two biggest sewing machines that are the most popular name brand right now that you'll see a lot, like if you go to your local Walmart, Michael's, Joann, you'll see a brand called Singer, or you'll see a brand called Brother. So those two are really good brands. They're good machines. They didn't ask me to sponsor this, so this is just my advice and my opinion I'm sharing to you. I wasn't asked to talk about them. But those are the two basic machines that are very popular. Those are some machines you can use to get started with sewing. Or if you already have a Singer sewing machine or a Brother sewing machine, great. That's all you need. So me personally, I have a Brother sewing machine right here. This is my sewing machine that was gifted to me in 2012 from my aunt. 2012 is when I learned how to sew. I took a local sewing class in Atlanta at a fashion school using the basic industrial sewing machine, Juki. This sewing machine right here that was gifted to me from my aunt, I learned how to sew on that by taking another sewing class at Joann. By the time I got to this sewing machine from my aunt, I wanted to learn how to sew commercial patterns. That's a total different story, but that's how I learned how to sew on that. So that's a Brother sewing machine. It's a HS3000 model. And if you come across a Brother machine on Amazon, Walmart, or any of your local craft stores, then yes, Brother brands are a good sewing machine to have. This sewing machine also does straight stitch and zigzag stitch, which are the two basic important stitches you will need whenever you're getting started with sewing. So if you're getting started with sewing and you need a sewing machine, I would recommend you get a Singer or you can get a Brother. And you can find those two brands at Walmart, Amazon, Michael's, Hobby Lobby, or any local craft store, small business, mom and pop shop that might be in your area. You'll be good to go with those machines. Now, tools and supplies number 2 is fabric. Now, when it comes to fabric for beginners, what you want to do is focus on fabrics that are easy to sew, like 100% cotton, or look for fabric that's like calico cotton, or maybe you can use fat quarters or muslin. And muslin fabric is typically used in sewing and design space to drape or practice sewing projects and design. You could buy these types of easy to get started sewing fabrics from your local Walmart, Joann, Michael's, Hobby Lobby. Lastly, you can also buy them online. As you can see here, there is some footage of me actually inside of Hobby Lobby showing you the different types of cotton fabrics you can use to get started with basic sewing. Also, here are some fat quarters you can use. I do like these fat quarters. They are 100% in cotton fabric, and they sell them in the 2 yards. So I do have some examples here of some of those fabrics that I bought last year. And these are really cute. You can buy something like this. This is 100% cotton. And you can also pair it with this type of fabric. You can mix match these fabrics and create some really beautiful, cute designs with this type of fabric. Or if you want to match something, but they sell them in the yards. You can buy this in either 2 yards or 3 yards. And different types of fabric like yellow. You can pair this with yellow, something like this. You can make pillows out of this, a pillowcase, makeup bag. You can also make a scarf. The ideas are endless. You can really get creative and mix and match and pair these different colors. Or even if you're someone that likes to color block, you could pair these colors together and just color block your patterns. So as you can see here on the screen, I am actually showing you examples of these fat quarters purchased at the store, just giving you an idea of what you can look for when you go inside of your local Walmart, Michael's, Joann's, Hobby Lobby, and look for the section that is for cotton fabric, and you can also get fat quarter fabrics. When you start sewing as a beginner, you're going to need to make sure you buy 2 types of scissors. You need 2 separates. This is very important. You're going to need 1 pair of scissors that you're going to use to cut your pattern and 1 pair of scissors that you're going to use to cut your fabric. Please do not use the same scissors that you use on your pattern to turn around and cut fabric. Do not do that. You have to have 2 separate scissors to cut 2 separate things, because your blade will damage the fabric. It's very important. Also, if you're using the scissors to cut fabric, please do not use that same fabric scissors to cut your personal belongings or your personal things in your house. Don't cut your paper products, your plastic products, cardboard boxes, food essential. Don't cut anything with your fabric scissors. You have to have 2 separate scissors in order to sew and cut your fabric and cut your patterns. I'm warning you, do not mix the 2. Keep it separate. Now, the next supplies you're going to need is pins, needles, and rulers. These are called ball head pins. Hang on, let me see if my camera can focus. Is it focusing? Okay, so these are ball head pins because there's like a ball on the head. And what you do with these pins is that you use these pins to pin your fabric together. Can you see that? Yeah, you use this to pin your fabric together. So whenever you're placing your pattern on top of the fabric, you will then use these needle ball pins and to hold your pattern pieces down in place. Next, you're going to also need sewing needles. Now, these are the type of sewing needles that are going to be used inside of your sewing machine. When you go and get your sewing needle, depending on the type of sewing project you're going to sew, then you have to buy the appropriate needle to accommodate your project accordingly. For example, in this video, we're only focusing on easy to use fabrics, which is 100% cotton or muslin. So what you're going to need is a needle that only sews for cotton. You can either use cotton needle or you can use a needle that says universal. And the next needle you're going to need is something thin and small like this, so you can hand sew. There are some times, depending on what you're sewing, you won't be able to use your sewing machine because of the tiny, intricate, delicate pieces of your project that you're sewing, where instead of using the sewing machine, you're going to have to go ahead and hand sew it. So you'll also need these types of needles so you can hand sew. Now, the next supply you're going to need is rulers and a measuring tape. Now, you need a measuring tape in order to take your measurements, or if you're sewing a project for apparel, for example, for family, friends, you still need a measuring tape to accurately take measurements so you can know how to cut what you need to cut appropriately, the right size. So you need a measuring tape, and you also need rulers where you can also lay these types of things on the material, on the project, and secure your measurements. Now, the next supply you're going to need is a cutting mat. This is a very large cutting mat. This is a 24 by 36 cutting mat. It's called self-healing cutting mat. So this is very important. Once you have your sewing machine and you're out there shopping for your supplies, please be sure to pick up one of these self-healing cutting mats. This mat is what you'll need to place your pattern on top of the mat, as well as place your fabric over it. And then you're going to start cutting out your pattern. And the reason it's called self-healing is because it actually, as you're using your rotary cutter or scissors or whatever you're cutting, it's going to heal itself and go back to its original shape. So you won't be cutting holes through your project. It's very important that you have a self-healing cutting mat, so you're not cutting through tables, you're not cutting through bed sheets, or trying to sew on the floor or trying to cut on the floor. Next, you're going to need some threads. Now, whenever I buy threads, I always buy them in pairs of 2 because buying one is not smart. So whatever project you're working on, always be sure to grab some threads and grab the color that matches the project you want to sew. Always buy accommodating matching threads that's going to match the piece of fabric or the product that you want to sew. So if you are going to sew something blue, be sure to get your blue threads. If you're going to sew something pink or brown, be sure to pick up the accommodating matching threads to match your fabric. Get your pink or brown. So it's very important to have your threads because this is what you need in order to stitch your project together. The next sewing supply you'll need is seam rippers. Now, seam rippers is very important to have. Once you start sewing something and you accidentally make a mistake on those stitches and threads, whatever the mistake may be, you may have mistakenly sewn something the wrong way or on the wrong side, or maybe the stitching somehow got messed up on your sewing project. You have to have seam rippers in order to rip those seams apart. So it's very important that you have seam rippers. Next sewing supply you'll need is fabric markings. Now there are so many different type of fabric markings you can use. This one is called an erasable pen. So the way this works is, let's say for example, you have your material down on the mat and you're trying to make markings on where you need to cut or create notches. You need to be able to have an erasable pen where you can make your markings. This does dissolve over time. It dissolves in like 2 or 3 days. So don't worry, it's not going to stay permanently marked on your fabric. There's also chalk. You could use this if you feel more comfortable using a chalk. And this is also the same thing. It's a chalk pen where it kind of rolls and you can use this to make your markings on your material. So you also need fabric markings in order to begin sewing. And the last thing you need to start sewing as a beginner is an easy to get started project. Again, this takes us back to the beginning. What do you want to sew? Do you know what you want to sew? In order to start off with something easy, you will Google easy sewing projects for beginners. You'll see a whole ton of projects you can use to get started with sewing. You can sew easy apparel like a shirt or some pajama pants, socks, or maybe you want to sew a tote bag or a makeup bag or a hat, or you could sew a pillow. The opportunity of sewing projects for beginners is endless. It's just a matter of what it is that you want to sew, and that's going to be easy for you to get started with as a beginner. Now, this is just the basics on what you need to get started in sewing. You don't need all the fancy bells and whistles or all of these tools you see here next to me. You don't need that. What I shared with you in this video is just the basics that you need to get up and going successfully and start beginning to sew as a beginner. Now, once you feel a little bit more comfortable and you're a little bit more advanced in sewing, then there are some other more high-tech advanced tools you will learn about and you'll also start using as a sewist. You'll learn about pattern weights instead of using the pins to hold down your fabric and your patterns. You'll also learn about rotary cutting instead of using the regular traditional scissors to cut your fabric. You can actually use the rotary cutter and just roll that thing all around to cut out your project. You'll also learn about seam gauge and seam guide, which is this tool here, which are these tools here. This is part of the measuring tool family. You're going to also learn about how to measure your material, fabrics, everything that you lay down flat on the table using a seam guide. So you'll learn about all these tools and supplies you need once you're a little bit more advanced and just have a little bit more tiny knowledge as a sewist. And of course, once you're ready to move to the next level. So now that we got the sewing tools and the supplies that you'll need out of the way in order to get started. So I hope you like this information. I truly hope it was helpful. Please give this video a like. On our next video, we're going to actually start sewing an easy project. So if you would like to learn how to sew something easy with me, please subscribe to this channel and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Bye!